TSA locks black woman in a room for random check. She returns with lawyers and shuts them down. Moments come along that shake us to our core, catching us off guard when we least expect it. Sometimes these moments take the form of a single incident that flips our entire understanding of fairness, justice, and dignity. For Sasha Daniels, a driven entrepreneur brimming with talent and ambition, her life took a harsh turn one afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. What was supposed to be a quick trip spiraled into a nightmare behind closed doors, as she found herself detained and humiliated under the guise of a random check. Yet Sasha refused to crumble. She returned with lawyers, determination, and a fierce resolve that would change everything. Sasha Daniels was no stranger to airports. As the founder of TechAdapt, a growing tech consulting firm in Atlanta, her work often took her across the country. Early on a Monday morning, she headed to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with a sense of purpose. Today's flight was more than routine. She was meeting a high-profile client whose contract could redefine her company's future. Confident yet focused, Sasha double-checked her presentation slides on the ride, eager to seize a rare opportunity that could catapult TechAdapt onto a national stage. Beneath her collected exterior, Sasha carried the lessons of her upbringing. Her mother, a tireless educator and civil rights activist, had instilled in her a fierce resolve in the face of injustice. Over the years, Sasha endured her share of microaggressions and outright discrimination, but she prided herself on navigating each challenge with grace. Today, her thoughts revolved around the pitch she would soon deliver, oblivious to the upheaval waiting at the security checkpoint. It began when she placed her laptop and carry-on in plastic bins for screening. The metal detector beeped unexpectedly, prompting a TSA agent to motion her aside. Initially, Sasha didn't worry. Random checks happened. Yet, as the minutes passed, unease crept in. An agent conferred with the supervisor, then asked her to follow them. She was led away from the public eye, down a corridor that felt eerily isolated. Calmly, she answered their questions: occupation, destination, the nature of her travel. But the agent's hushed exchanges hinted this was more than a typical delay. The fluorescent lights and blank walls closed in, and Sasha sensed she was about to face the kind of scrutiny her mother had long warned her about. A random check had taken a sharp turn into something far more invasive. She braced herself, unaware just how deeply this moment would change the course of her life. Minutes ticked by, then more than an hour. The confidence that had radiated through Sasha earlier was dissipating. The two TSA agents, identified only by small name badges, one read Harrington, the other Lopez, seemed to be waiting for something or someone. They whispered back and forth, occasionally glancing at their phones, and avoided Sasha's attempts at conversation. Eventually, a uniformed supervisor entered, a man who introduced himself curtly as Supervisor Grant. He stood with arms folded, looking Sasha up and down, almost as if mentally cataloguing the potential threat she posed. In a voice that tried for neutrality but carried an unmistakable edge, he informed her. They would be conducting a more extensive search of her belongings and her person. When she dared to ask what grounds they had for suspecting her of anything, his answer was painfully vague. "You've been selected for an extended random screening based on TSA protocols." The word random made Sasha's blood boil, but she contained herself. She had flown enough times to know that certain travelers got picked more often than others, and the pattern was far from random. She tried to calmly explain she was on a tight schedule, that she had a flight to catch for an important business meeting, but the supervisor's expression remained impassive. They emptied her suitcase methodically, rummaging through her clothes, undergarments, personal products, everything that could leave a person feeling extremely exposed. Then they moved on to her laptop, powering it on. Before she realized what was happening, they started asking for her password. She balked, stating that she had confidential client information on there. Yet they insisted, claiming the right to inspect electronic devices for any sign of illicit or dangerous material. Her stomach twisted into knots. She was proud of the secure systems TechAdapt used. She also knew that handing over her password was a direct violation of many of her contracts and NDAs. But she was given a cold ultimatum: either unlock the laptop or face further detainment. She typed in her password with trembling fingers. Sasha's mind reeled. She had nothing to hide, but seeing these strangers comb through her emails, personal files, and even pictures felt like a deep violation. She wanted to scream, to call someone, to call her lawyer. Yet any attempt to do so was met with a brusque, "You'll get your chance to make calls soon." After scanning her laptop, the agents seemed disappointed not to find some incriminating evidence. Supervisor Grant cleared his throat, as if trying to decide the next move. Instead of letting her go, he stepped back into the hallway, as if awaiting new instructions from a higher authority. Seconds later, Sasha heard muffled voices. She couldn't make out full sentences, but caught words like backup and possible threat. Her heart pounded. This was spiraling out of control. In the pit of her stomach, fear gave way to anger. She had done nothing wrong. She had meticulously built a career on integrity and excellence. Nothing she had worked for warranted this level of scrutiny or harassment. Yet here she was, effectively under guard in a small, windowless room with no clear path to relief. When Harrington and Lopez stepped out for a moment, presumably to confer with their supervisor, Sasha seized the brief moment of privacy to check her phone. She had multiple missed calls and messages from her team asking if she had landed, if everything was okay. She quickly texted her best friend and co-worker, a woman named Marisol, typing held by TSA. "Something's very wrong. Get help." She sent her location, then stuffed the phone back on the table before the agents returned. Her heart hammered. If they caught her doing that, the consequences could escalate. Moments later, Supervisor Grant came back in, flanked by 2 more TSA personnel. Sasha recognized the distinctive outlines of handcuffs on one agent's belt, and her pulse quickened in alarm. This was no casual screening. They were treating her like a criminal suspect. The supervisor calmly announced they needed to do a physical pat-down. Sasha stiffened. She'd heard horror stories of invasive searches, and the thought made her feel ill. But refusal, she knew, would only complicate matters. Taking a shaky breath, she nodded her consent. One of the new arrivals, a female agent named Jackson, began the pat-down. She ran her gloved hands across Sasha's arms, torso, legs, and ankles. It felt far more intimate than the usual routine. At one point, Sasha even winced because the agent pressed with unexpected force. When Sasha tried to object, Jackson barked at her to remain still. Once finished, Jackson stepped back and gave a curt nod to Grant. Sasha watched them exchange a look. It was a moment of disappointment from them, as if they were actually expecting to find contraband strapped to her body. "She's clear," Jackson said, but didn't look relieved. If anything, she looked annoyed. Supervisor Grant then asked a question that made Sasha's stomach drop. "Who paid for your ticket?" Sasha explained that her company had purchased the ticket with its business account. She offered to provide the company's details. They asked for proof, so she scrolled through emails on her phone to show the airline receipt. The supervisor took down the information as though logging a list of possible leads. Not a single apology was offered. No one tried to reassure her this was normal. They seemed determined to make the process as demeaning as possible. There was something in their eyes, a flicker of suspicion or even hostility. She recognized that look. It was the look of people who had already decided she was guilty. The only question was of what. Hours passed, or so it felt. The clock on the wall read nearly 2 hours since she'd first been pulled aside. Her flight would be leaving soon, if it hadn't already. Sasha repeatedly, politely inquired if she could go catch her plane. Each time she was told, "You'll have to wait." Eventually, Supervisor Grant and the others filed out, leaving her alone once again with Harrington and Lopez. The two agents didn't look at her, didn't talk to her. They just stood near the door, arms folded. She was effectively detained, though no one had used that specific word. She leaned her head back against the stark white wall, trying to calm herself. Panic wouldn't help. She needed to think logically. She considered texting her lawyer friend, but worried that might provoke them. She'd already sent out an SOS to Marisol. Maybe someone was on their way to help. In the back of her mind, Sasha recalled stories she'd heard about how some travelers, particularly black travelers, were detained, questioned and humiliated by airport security for hours without justification. She remembered reading about a man who missed his father's funeral because of an extended screening. He'd received apologies later, but that did nothing to fix the pain inflicted. Would that be her story now? A humiliating, arbitrary ordeal that would end with a half-hearted, "We're just doing our job," while she faced the fallout from missing her critical business meeting. She closed her eyes, conjuring an image of her mother's reassuring face. She reminded herself to breathe deeply and steadily. "Fear is your enemy," her mother would say. "Let your mind stay clear. Let your will stand strong." It was a test of her resolve, and she had no idea how much worse it would get. All she knew was that this was no casual random check. They were looking for something, or perhaps they just wanted to prove a point. Either way, Sasha wasn't going down quietly. In that claustrophobic room, a new determination took hold. She was no longer merely a frightened traveler hoping to catch a flight. She was a woman who had been wronged, and she would remember every detail. They would learn that messing with Sasha Daniels was a mistake they'd come to regret, whether they realized it or not. Supervisor Grant returned about 15 minutes later, an expression of grim satisfaction plastered onto his face. He tossed Sasha's travel documents onto the table. "You missed your flight," he remarked, with no trace of sympathy. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of the inconvenience. It was more like a statement of fact, though beneath it lurked an air of triumph. Sasha forced a deep breath, her nerves raw. "How can I rebook?" she asked quietly, attempting to hold on to any shred of composure. She knew anger would only inflame the situation, but rage bubbled just under her calm exterior. Grant crossed his arms. "We'll discuss that once we've completed our procedures. You'll be held until we're certain there's no threat to national security." The phrase, national security, jolted her. They were painting her as a potential terrorist. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I have a right to know why you're detaining me, on what grounds." "We told you. It's a random extended screening," said Grant. "You fit certain criteria." He left it at that, his eyes flickering with a strange glint that made Sasha think criteria. "Is it the color of my skin? My last name? My hair?" At that moment, the door pushed open and a slim young woman in a TSA uniform entered, her gaze darting nervously between Sasha and Grant. The name patch read Nguyen. She seemed to sense the tension in the air because she hesitated, clearing her throat. "Supervisor, can I speak to you outside?" she asked quietly. Grant's jaw clenched. "Not now. We're in the middle of something." "But sir," Nguyen insisted, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's a situation at checkpoint B that needs your attention." He shot her a withering glare, then nodded at the other agents. "Stay here. Keep an eye on Miss Daniels," he instructed Harrington and Lopez, emphasizing Miss Daniels as if it were a code word. With that, Grant stalked out, Nguyen trailing behind, looking tense. For a few moments, there was silence. Sasha could hear the hum of the air vent. She could feel the suspicion radiating off Harrington and Lopez. She decided to take a risk. Is this how you treat people every day? She asked softly, her tone measured. I've cooperated. I've done nothing wrong, neither agent replied. Harrington shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat while Lopez avoided eye contact. A crack of uncertainty appeared on their faces. Perhaps they knew this had gone too far, but they also knew the power dynamics at play. Sasha saw it. They were cogs in a machine that rarely admitted mistakes. For a fleeting moment, she caught a hint of sympathy in Lopez's eyes, but he said nothing. Time dragged on. At some point, an airport staffer brought in a small, styrofoam cup of water for Sasha. She drank it gratefully. The dryness in her throat momentarily eased, but her mind raced. She needed a strategy. She wanted to film what was happening, but that would likely lead to immediate confiscation of her phone. She wanted to call her lawyer, but she worried they'd prevent it. She rehearsed her next moves in her head, determined to stay one step ahead. After what felt like an eternity, Supervisor Grant burst back into the room, a strange mix of anger and resignation creasing his features. Behind him, Sasha saw Marisol, her friend and co-worker, standing in the hallway, talking animatedly to another TSA officer. Marisol's face was a storm of anxiety and determination. She'd actually come to the airport. The wave of relief that washed over Sasha was profound. Grant gestured to Harrington. Tell her friend she can't be back here. This is a restricted area, he snapped. Harrington promptly left, presumably to escort Marisol out. Sasha sensed a shift in the dynamic. Marisol's arrival meant they couldn't keep her hidden away forever, without consequences. Maybe the TSA realized they were dealing with a person who had support, who wouldn't just vanish into compliance. Nonetheless, the tension heightened, like a balloon inflated to its breaking point. You got someone out there making a fuss for you, Grant said, narrowing his eyes at Sasha. You thinking of suing us? Calling the media? Threatening a discrimination suit? The sarcasm in his tone was unmistakable, but behind it was genuine concern. Sasha knew better than to show her full hand. She shrugged calmly. I'll do whatever's necessary to protect my rights, Grant scoffed. Suit yourself. He glanced at his watch, then motioned to the door. Agents, we're done here. We'll keep her on record in case she tries anything in the future. The two underlings scrambled to pack up the scattered documents and laptop. In a whirlwind of movement, they thrust Sasha's belongings back into her carry-on. No apology. No formal release statement. Just silent efficiency, as if they realized they'd gone overboard but wanted to sweep it under the rug as quickly as possible. Sasha stared at them, incredulous. Am I free to go? She asked, though her question dripped with bitter irony. Grant nodded unceremoniously. Yes, but don't expect a free pass next time. With that final dig, he turned on his heel and strode out. No explanation. No trace of remorse. Harrington and Lopez followed, leaving Sasha alone in the now lifeless room. Her hands trembled as she shoved her laptop into her bag, smoothed out her clothes, and tried to reassemble herself mentally. The anger pulsated through her. She considered confronting Grant again, demanding an explanation, but she realized it would likely accomplish nothing but more harassment. The immediate victory was getting out of that room, yet even as she left, stepping back into the bustling corridor of travelers who had no idea what she'd just endured, she knew her battle was only beginning. Outside, Marisol stood, arms folded, worry etched on her brow. Oh my God, Sasha, she exclaimed, rushing forward. They embraced tightly, a moment of solace in the chaos. Sasha could have cried from relief. Did you call a lawyer? Sasha whispered into Marisol's ear, her voice tight with emotion. Marisol nodded vigorously. Yes, and the moment I told them what was happening, they advised you not to say anything else to the TSA agents. They're from the ACLU's local chapter. They want you to come in and give a statement. Sasha exhaled, feeling both exhaustion and a renewed sense of purpose. "I need to rebook my flight," she said, glancing at the overhead monitors. Sure enough, her flight to Chicago had left over an hour ago. Marisol placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her away from the security area. "That's the least of our worries now. You missed the meeting, but our client's willing to reschedule." She paused, looking Sasha up and down, checking for any sign of injury. "Are you okay?" Sasha hesitated. Physically, she was fine, just drained, humiliated, and fuming. Mentally, she felt a storm brewing. She thought of the countless others who had endured such racial profiling, who didn't have someone waiting for them outside that room, who didn't have a friend who could call for legal help. The injustice of it all tightened her chest, made her throat burn. She squared her shoulders. "Let's go," she said. "I have some calls to make." Her ordeal with the TSA may have ended in that moment, but a chain reaction of consequences was already set in motion. What she didn't realize, as she walked away from that checkpoint, was just how deep the rabbit hole would go, from the almost farcical attempts by TSA management to cover their tracks, to the chilling revelations that would come to light in the investigation that followed. And in the end, her pursuit of justice would test her courage beyond anything she'd ever faced. But one thing was certain: Sasha Daniels would not be silent. A reckoning was on the horizon. The seeds of that day would grow into a confrontation that no one could have foreseen, and she wouldn't be alone in her fight. Sasha stared out the car window on the ride back from the airport, feeling a swirl of betrayal, anger, and exhaustion. Marisol drove in tense silence, stealing worried glances in the rearview mirror. The moment they reached Sasha's apartment, Marisol shared a lead. The ACLU had agreed to see Sasha immediately. Delta had also tried rebooking her flight, but the meeting in Chicago would now have to be postponed. After Marisol left, Sasha scrolled through texts and social media posts. Friends expressed shock and support. Some recounted their own harrowing TSA experiences. A flood of injustice stories reminded her she wasn't alone. She dialed the ACLU's number, briefly summarizing her ordeal. They asked her to bring all documentation to their Atlanta office the next day. That night, she struggled to sleep, haunted by the humiliation of rubber-gloved pat-downs and the searing memory of Supervisor Grant's condescension. A call from her mother the next morning steadied her. "I'm proud of you for standing up," her mother said calmly. "These injustices don't fix themselves." Sasha arrived at the ACLU, where staff attorney Aisha Hammond listened intently to her account. Sasha handed over her boarding pass, ID copies, and screenshots of frantic texts. Aisha called it an egregious case of likely racial profiling, suggesting they file a formal complaint and possibly pursue a civil rights lawsuit. Exhausted yet resolved, Sasha agreed. She refused to let the TSA's actions fade without challenge. Driving home, she stopped briefly at a nearby park, letting the noise of children playing soothe her nerves. Though apprehension gnawed at her, determination blazed brighter. She now understood the gravity of her stand. This was more than her own pain. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been locked away, voiceless, under the label of random check. 2 days later, Sasha sat at a long rectangular table in the downtown offices of Wright and Caldwell, a civil rights law firm that often collaborated with the ACLU. The room had a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, which glowed under the midday sun. A cluster of lawyers, paralegals, and interns filled the space, flipping through papers, comparing notes on laptops, and conferring in hushed tones. Aisha Hammond from the ACLU sat next to Sasha, introducing her to the team. Richard Wright, a tall man in his 50s with a silver streak in his hair, extended a warm handshake. "We've been briefed on your situation," he said, his voice measured yet empathetic. "We believe you have a strong case." Sasha felt both relieved and overwhelmed by the show of support. Thank you, she said softly, not entirely sure what to expect from this meeting. Richard wasted no time. We'll be looking at potential violations of your Fourth Amendment rights, unreasonable search and seizure, and also the possibility of racial discrimination, which could invoke the Equal Protection Clause. However, cases against TSA can be tricky. They have wide latitude under federal law. We'll need irrefutable evidence. Sasha nodded, her mind racing. Video footage, witness statements, any records of their so-called screening, she said. That's what we need. Richard exchanged a glance with Aisha. We're working on a formal request for all relevant footage and documents from the TSA. Sometimes they stall or claim security exemptions, but we'll do everything in our power to get what we need. Also, we'd like you to detail any psychological or professional harm you've experienced as a result of this incident, lost business, emotional distress, that sort of thing. Sasha's face hardened as she thought about the client meeting in Chicago that she'd missed. While the organization had been understanding, she felt a shift in how they viewed her reliability. Time would tell whether that lost day would cost her company financially. Her voice trembled slightly. I'll provide all of that. A paralegal distributed documents outlining possible legal routes. One route involved filing a complaint directly with the Department of Homeland Security Office for civil rights and civil liberties. Another involved a lawsuit against specific TSA officials in their individual capacity. Aisha spoke up. Typically, the government tries to protect its agents from personal liability, but sometimes direct accountability can be argued if they clearly violated policy or constitutional rights. Sasha exhaled slowly. It's not just me, she began. I've heard stories from other travelers, especially people of color, who've gone through similar ordeals. This kind of profiling has to stop. Richard nodded, a light of determination in his eyes. That's why we're here, to set precedent. We'll do our best to make sure they can't sweep this under the rug. The meeting lasted for hours, diving into legal nuances, potential defenses the TSA might use, and the complexities of taking on a federal agency. By the end, Sasha's head throbbed, but her heart felt strangely buoyed. She had found allies, people who believed in her cause and had the expertise to help fight it. Outside, as she prepared to head back to her office, she noticed a stream of missed calls and texts on her phone from an unknown number. Reluctantly, she dialed back. To her surprise, a nervous male voice answered. Hi, he stammered. My name is Isaiah. I was there at the airport that day. I saw you get taken away, and, well, I just thought you should know something. Sasha frowned. How did you get my number? I asked around, Isaiah admitted, sounding embarrassed. I asked one of the flight attendants. She said she knew a friend of yours. I'm so sorry if this is intrusive, but I need to tell you something. Could we meet somewhere public? I can't talk about it on the phone. Sasha's curiosity piqued. Meet me at Parker's Coffee downtown, near the park, in an hour. The hour passed in a blur as Sasha quickly updated Aisha via text, just in case this was some kind of trap or hoax. She arrived at Parker's Coffee, a small, trendy spot with exposed brick walls and an aroma of espresso that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. In a corner booth sat a young black man in his early 20s, wearing jeans and a plain T-shirt. He stood up as she approached, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Sasha, right? That's me, she said cautiously. Isaiah, he nodded, then gestured for her to sit. After they each ordered something to drink, a latte for her, black coffee for him, he leaned in and lowered his voice. I work at the airport, not for the TSA, but for a private security company that sometimes assists them. He paused, glancing around. I'm risking a lot by telling you this, but I saw the entire thing, and I overheard them talking after you were taken to that back room. Sasha's pulse quickened. Go on. Isaiah's voice, took on a shaky edge. They were bragging about how they can pick out certain types of travelers and do these extended screenings. It sounded like they were targeting mostly people of color. One of them said, "We've got to keep the numbers up or they'll think we're going soft." I didn't catch all the details, but I remember them chuckling about how people get so rattled they can't defend themselves later. The room seemed to spin for Sasha. It was worse than she imagined. They weren't just random bigots. They had some twisted sense of duty or quotas. Isaiah continued, "I'm telling you this because it's messed up. I've seen them do it to others. But your case seems bigger, and I heard them say they might have to deal with it differently because of your connections. They were worried you'd go to the media." Sasha's jaw clenched. "They threatened to keep me on record, make it worse if I tried to speak out." Isaiah nodded solemnly. "I can't provide official documentation, but I can give a statement if it helps. I'm not sure if my boss would retaliate, but I'm willing to do the right thing." Emotions welled up in Sasha: gratitude, anger, and a renewed resolve. "Thank you," she said, her voice hushed. "People like you make all the difference. I'll connect you with my lawyers, and we can figure out how to handle this carefully." They exchanged information. Before parting, Isaiah glanced over his shoulder as though expecting watchers. "Just be careful," he said. "These people play dirty." As Sasha left the coffee shop, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. This new information was both a validation of her suspicion and a stark reminder of how deep and deliberate the discrimination might be. The fight against the TSA was no longer just a personal vendetta. It was about uncovering a systemic practice that targeted people unjustly, hidden behind the veneer of random checks. She updated Aisha and Richard about Isaiah's potential testimony. Their excitement was palpable. An eyewitness willing to come forward was a significant breakthrough. But caution was key. If TSA officials were indeed employing intimidation tactics, they wouldn't hesitate to go after whistleblowers. That night, Sasha found it hard to sleep. She replayed Isaiah's words. They might have to deal with it differently. She pictured the smug face of Supervisor Grant, the blank stares of Harrington and Lopez, and the humiliating hours she'd spent in that room. The anger that boiled in her veins was no longer fearsome, but clarifying. "I will not back down," she vowed. She thought of the countless others who might never have had the platform or the resources to stand up to such practices, who perhaps ended up with traumatizing nightmares or deep mistrust in the system. She knew she was fighting for them as much as for herself. Her phone chimed with a late-night text from Marisol. "Just checking on you, boss lady. Sending love. We're behind you 100%. Sasha smiled at the screen, her heart warming. She typed back, "I appreciate you more than you know." Tomorrow promised new battles, more legal maneuvers, more calls, more emotional upheaval. But for the first time in days, Sasha felt a surge of optimism strong enough to eclipse her anxiety. If the TSA thought they could bury the truth, they were in for a rude awakening. Because Sasha Daniels had found her allies, and they were prepared to shine the light on every dark corner until justice prevailed. The next week began with a flurry of meetings, calls, and emails. Sasha's daily routine, which once revolved around client consultations and project deadlines, was replaced by legal conferences and media inquiries. Word had leaked to a local journalist from the Atlanta Times who caught wind of her story, and soon the press started sniffing around. Sasha and her legal team held a strategy session. Aisha, Richard, and a few others huddled in a meeting room at Wright and Caldwell. The walls were covered in sticky notes detailing timelines, potential witnesses, and relevant laws. "We should be proactive with the media," suggested Aisha. "We can't let TSA spin this first." Sasha swallowed hard. She was used to giving presentations about technology solutions, not about civil rights violations. The idea of standing in front of cameras made her stomach flutter with nerves. But she also understood the power of public opinion. "I'll do it," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. This might be what it takes to bring the truth out. Later that day, the Atlanta Times published a piece titled "Local Businesswoman Alleges Racial Profiling" by TSA at Hartsfield-Jackson. The article included Sasha's initial account, quotes from Aisha confirming the ACLU's involvement, and a brief response from TSA's Public Relations Department denying any wrongdoing and maintaining that Sasha had been selected for a routine procedure. The public response was swift and intense. Online comment sections lit up with debates. Some readers expressed outrage and solidarity, sharing their own experiences of invasive searches. Others questioned her story, accusing her of seeking attention or playing the race card. Sasha knew this was inevitable, but it still hurt to see strangers attacking her integrity. The real turning point came when a second traveler, an older black man named Kenneth Evans, reached out, claiming he'd had a near-identical experience with Supervisor Grant just a month earlier. Kenneth provided a sworn affidavit describing how he was detained for hours, forced to unlock his phone, and subjected to an invasive pat-down. He said he'd been too shaken to complain formally, but after seeing Sasha's story, found the courage to come forward. Overnight, the case shifted from a singular allegation to what looked like a pattern of targeting. With Kenneth's affidavit, plus Isaiah's insider testimony, Sasha's legal team felt momentum. They filed multiple motions, seeking to obtain TSA's internal records for that day, including any written notes or digital logs that showed who was flagged, for what reasons, and how often. "If we can establish a pattern of racial profiling," said Richard, "we have a strong foundation for a civil rights lawsuit." As expected, TSA pushed back hard. Their attorneys fired off letters accusing Sasha of misrepresenting the facts. They claimed the agency did not condone discrimination and that any extended searches were based on behavior detection methods and random selections. But the more they denied, the more suspicious it looked, especially with the new evidence accumulating. Behind the scenes, Isaiah remained nervous about the repercussions of his whistleblowing. "They've started rotating me to different checkpoints," he told Sasha in a hushed phone call. "I feel like they're trying to isolate me, but I'm still all in. I can't let them get away with this." Sasha thanked him repeatedly, reassuring him that her legal team would do everything possible to protect him from retaliation. Then came a bombshell email in Sasha's inbox, marked anonymous. The sender claimed to be a TSA employee who had access to security logs and guidelines. The message, full of cryptic references, suggested that there was an internal directive, unofficial but widely understood, that pressured agents at certain airports to meet screening quotas for high-risk profiles. The sender implied that the real reason Sasha was selected had little to do with actual suspicion and more to do with meeting numbers. The email ended with, "I'm sorry, this isn't right." Sasha forwarded it to her legal team immediately. Her mind reeled. Quotas, racial profiling disguised as security measures. She felt nauseous yet vindicated. Everything she suspected was being confirmed by these shadowy sources. 2 days later, the tension reached a crescendo. A regional TSA spokesperson called a press conference, presumably to address the growing media coverage. The spokesperson stood behind a podium, wearing a stern expression. Cameras clicked, microphones pointed. The statement was both defensive and dismissive. "While we cannot comment on active litigation, we strongly refute allegations of racial bias in our security procedures. Our protocols are rooted in federal mandates and are colorblind. Any claim to the contrary is simply unfounded." Watching a live stream of the press conference from her office, Sasha felt her blood boil. She turned to Aisha, who was taking notes. They're doubling down. Yes, they are, Aisha said grimly, but so are we. Moments later, the spokesperson's face flickered with a hint of anxiety as a reporter asked, "What about the lawsuit filed by Miss Daniels and the affidavit from Mr. Evans stating nearly identical experiences with specific TSA agents at Hartsfield-Jackson?" The spokesperson fumbled, offering a vague corporate speak response about reviewing the specifics. Sasha noticed a sudden shift in the air. The press smelled blood. They peppered the spokesperson with questions about internal memos, the alleged targeting of travelers of color, and the possibility of whistleblowers coming forward. The spokesperson hurriedly ended the conference, refusing to take more questions. Within hours, social media erupted. Hashtags like #FlyingWhileBlack and #SarahShaw profiling trended locally. Sasha found her inbox flooded with messages from supporters, reporters seeking interviews, and unfortunately, some hate mail. She tried to focus on the positive, the growing wave of indignation and support that validated her decision to stand up. That evening, she met with Marisol and a few close friends over dinner. The conversation was animated, ranging from frustration to determination. Some worried for Sasha's safety. Others marveled at how quickly her case had gained national attention. Marisol squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "This is bigger than Tech Adapt or that missed flight. You're changing the world, one step at a time." Sasha, eyes glistening, reflected on how this entire journey began with a single beep in a metal detector. Life had a strange way of twisting ordinary moments into cataclysmic events. She swirled her glass of water, thinking aloud, "I never asked for this, but now that it's here, I'm going to see it through." The following day, a major development rocked the entire case. A U.S. District Court judge granted an expedited review of Sasha's motion to obtain TSA's internal documents. Richard and Aisha were thrilled. "This means the court is taking it seriously," Aisha explained. "They suspect wrongdoing, or at least they think it's plausible enough to warrant immediate action. One step closer to exposing the truth." As Sasha prepared for the hearing, the weight of it all pressed on her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for herself, but for every traveler who'd ever been singled out, for every person who'd endured that cold, windowless backroom. She thought about her mother's words, "We fight these injustices one step at a time." She also thought of all the people who'd been silenced, intimidated, or too traumatized to speak. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Keep going. We're behind you." It was presumably another silent supporter from within the TSA ranks, encouragement from the shadows. It made her smile through her anxiety. Nerves tingling, Sasha straightened her posture and stepped out onto the sidewalk, heading toward the courthouse with her legal team. Reporters were already gathering, and bright camera lights shone. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for, the juncture where her personal nightmare transformed into a broader fight for justice. All the while, she held on to the belief that, in the end, the truth would prevail and that she was on the right side of history. The courthouse lobby buzzed with subdued excitement. Marble floors echoed with hushed footsteps, and the faint scent of old paper and polished wood mingled in the air. Sasha's heart hammered as she walked through the security check, an irony not lost on her, and followed her lawyers into the courtroom. Rows of benches were already filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and TSA representatives, all wearing stoic expressions. At the front, a solemn judge in a black robe sat behind a polished wooden bench, reviewing paperwork through a pair of rimless glasses. This was Judge Rebecca Coates, known throughout the district for her fair but formidable approach. Sasha took a seat beside Richard and Aisha at the plaintiff's table, trying to steady her breathing. On the defendant's side, TSA's legal team was led by a sharp-faced attorney named Victor McAllister. rumored to be a master of legal technicalities and delaying tactics. Supervisor Grant was also there, wearing a suit that seemed 2 sizes too large, his expression strained. Sasha recognized Harrington and Lopez seated behind him. For a fleeting moment, she locked eyes with Grant. He quickly averted his gaze. The clerk announced the case, Daniels vs. Transportation Security Administration et al. The judge nodded. "Let's proceed," she said, her tone clipped but controlled. Richard stood, his voice carrying the measured confidence of a seasoned litigator. He succinctly laid out Sasha's allegations, the invasive detention, the repeated refusals to explain her selection, the intimidation tactics, and the potential systemic bias suggested by multiple sources. He then requested the immediate release of TSA's internal records relating to screening protocols and racial profiling complaints. McAllister rose in a practiced display of theatrical indignation. "Your Honor, the TSA denies all allegations of wrongdoing. Our procedures are governed by federal regulations designed to protect national security. Any attempt to pry into these procedures risks exposing sensitive information that could compromise airport safety." The judge frowned. "Counsel, national security is paramount, but the court has a duty to ensure constitutional rights are not violated. We can review documents in camera if needed." McAllister tried to sidestep. "Yes, but we maintain that Miss Daniels's selection was random and that her extended screening was within lawful bounds. We see no need to release sensitive internal data that is classified or beyond the scope." Aisha stood. "Your Honor, we have whistleblower statements and at least one email implicating TSA supervisors in maintaining quotas that specifically target travelers of color. This is a serious allegation that must be investigated. We're happy to have an in-camera review, but we insist that the requested materials be produced." Judge Coates eyed McAllister. "I don't see how the TSA can claim all these documents are classified. We're talking about logs for a specific date, plus guidelines for extended screenings. I will order a limited production of documents for in-camera review. If the court deems them relevant and not a threat to genuine national security, they will be released to the plaintiff's counsel." McAllister opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it. "Yes, Your Honor." A small, triumphant grin tugged at the corners of Aisha's mouth. Sasha let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This was a significant victory, one step closer to unearthing the truth. The hearing continued, addressing everything from the timeline of discovery to the scope of depositions. At one point, the judge mentioned the possibility of depositions for the specific TSA agents named in Sasha's complaint, including Supervisor Grant. McAllister bristled at this, but he could only nod stiffly. After a tense hour, Judge Coates adjourned, setting dates for further proceedings. Sasha watched as McAllister hurriedly conferred with Grant, who looked rattled. The group exited quickly, avoiding the press outside. Sasha's exit, however, was met with a flurry of cameras and microphones. She tried to keep her composure. A local reporter asked, "Miss Daniels, how do you feel about today's proceedings?" For a moment, Sasha considered a carefully measured response, but the rawness of her ordeal still smoldered within her. She spoke clearly, "I feel hopeful. We just want the truth. If TSA is truly following legal, non-discriminatory procedures, they have nothing to hide. But if there's a pattern of racial profiling, it ends here." A second reporter from a national outlet pushed forward. "Do you believe this case could uncover widespread misconduct?" Sasha glanced at Aisha, who nodded encouragingly. Turning back to the reporter, Sasha replied, "We have reason to believe my experience wasn't an isolated incident. Our hope is that by bringing these facts to light, we can ensure no one else endures what I did." The swirl of questions continued, but Richard gently guided her away toward an elevator. Once the doors closed, Sasha leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "That was intense," she whispered. Richard gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You handled it well. The fight's far from over, but today's outcome was good." In the following weeks, depositions began. Supervisor Grant and Agents Harrington, Lopez and Jackson were all deposed under oath. Their stories varied slightly, sometimes contradicting each other's accounts. At times, McAllister objected, citing security concerns. But the more they spoke, the clearer it became that the official narrative was full of holes. In the private transcripts, references to meeting the screening numbers popped up, though the agents tried to downplay their meaning. Meanwhile, Sasha's attorneys received partial access to the TSA logs for the day in question. The heavily redacted pages still revealed startling data. Of the 37 extended screenings that day, 29 involved travelers of color. This pattern matched the statements from Kenneth Evans, Isaiah, and the anonymous email. While TSA insisted it was all coincidental, the statistics painted a damning portrait. Then came the day Sasha and her lawyers were called into a settlement conference. McAllister arrived with a stern-faced TSA official from Washington who promptly offered a settlement figure and a vague promise that the agency would review its internal practices. The sum was sizable, but it came with a non-disclosure agreement (NDA) that would prevent Sasha from sharing any details publicly. Sasha's eyes scanned the offer letter, her stomach churning. She thought about the nights she'd lain awake, reliving that detention room, how her business had suffered missed opportunities, how many stories she'd heard from other victims. Taking the money and signing an NDA felt like blood money. She looked to Richard, then Aisha. Both wore conflicted expressions, knowing this was a common tactic, pay off the plaintiff to suppress the bigger issue. Finally, Sasha handed the letter back. "No," she said firmly. "I didn't come this far to be silenced." The TSA official's face twitched. Surprised, McAllister pressed. "You should really consider." "Thank you," Sasha interrupted. But no. That refusal marked a turning point. The gloves came off. TSA's legal team ramped up their attacks, painting Sasha as a disgruntled traveler looking for a payday. They released statements claiming her business was failing, implying that she'd fabricated the entire ordeal for money. It was a smear campaign, and it stung. Her staff at TechAdapt found themselves fielding suspicious inquiries from potential clients who'd read the headlines. But Sasha remained steadfast. She conducted a measured media response, pointing to the evidence, the logs, the whistleblower statements. As the court date approached, the tension in the city grew. The local community rallied around her, holding small protests outside the airport. The story had transcended Sasha's personal narrative and become a rallying cry for broader reform in airport security. Finally, the day of the trial arrived complete with jury selection, opening statements, and witness testimonies. Isaiah, voice trembling but resolute, told the court what he'd overheard that day, recounting how certain TSA staff openly joked about bagging the right type of traveler. Kenneth Evans sat in the audience, tears in his eyes, grateful that this was finally being aired in public. When Sasha took the stand, she locked eyes with the jury. "I'm not here for revenge or money," she said, her voice resonating through the silent courtroom. "I'm here because my rights were violated, and I believe in a system that should protect everyone, not just those who fit a comfortable profile." During cross-examination, McAllister tried to corner her with insinuations of her seeking attention or financial gain. Sasha maintained her poise, clarifying each event, refusing to be rattled. Each question he posed further revealed the cracks in the TSA's story. When the gavel finally fell on the last day of testimony, the courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Judge Coates dismissed the jury, who would deliberate on the evidence. Sasha sat with clammy hands, glancing at her team. This was the culmination of months of fear, anger, and determination. Outside, the press waited. Speculation ran rampant. Some predicted a hung jury, given the complexity of suing a federal agency. Others said the evidence was too strong to ignore. As Sasha stepped into the crisp morning air, she sensed that no matter the verdict, something seismic had shifted. She'd peeled back the curtain on an insidious practice, forcing it into the spotlight. Now it was in the jury's hands. And for Sasha Daniels, the waiting would be the hardest part of all. The jury deliberated for 3 long days, 72 hours of anxious waiting that felt like an eternity. Sasha tried to keep busy, immersing herself in tech-adapt projects and meeting with her team to maintain a sense of normalcy. Yet every time her phone buzzed, she jumped, expecting news from the courthouse. Finally, on the 4th day, a call came in from Richard. "They have a verdict," he said simply, his tone guarded. "We need to be in court by noon." Sasha's stomach churned. She slipped on a modest black dress, her mind swirling with possibilities. Would the jury side with her, or would they let TSA's disclaimers and national security arguments sway them? Part of her feared disappointment. Part of her felt hopeful, remembering the sincerity of the whistleblowers, the damning logs, and the heartfelt testimonies. She arrived at the courthouse with Marisol by her side. Cameras flashed. A hush fell in the corridors as people parted to let her pass. In the courtroom, the air crackled with anticipation. Judge Coates entered, and everyone rose. The jury filed in, somber and stone-faced. "Madam Foreperson," the judge intoned, "has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman in a neat grey suit, stood, a folded piece of paper in her hand. "We have, Your Honour." She handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Coates. The judge read silently for a moment, then nodded. "In the matter of Daniels v. Transportation Security Administration et al., the jury finds in favour of the plaintiff, Miss Sasha Daniels, on the claim of unlawful detention and violation of constitutional rights." The courtroom seemed to exhale in unison. The judge continued, "The jury has awarded compensatory damages in the amount of $750,000 and punitive damages against individual defendants in the amount of $2 million. A stunned silence followed. Sasha's heart pounded. She looked at Richard, who gripped her hand, eyes brimming with emotion. Aisha beamed, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. They had done it an extraordinary win against a federal agency. The sum of money was staggering, but more significant was the official acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a condemnation of the TSA's behavior. Supervisor Grant paled, staring at the table. McAllister's face twisted in disbelief. No doubt the TSA would consider appeals, but for the moment, the moral victory was clear. In the gallery, Isaiah raised a clenched fist in silent triumph. Kenneth Evans bowed his head, whispering thanks under his breath. As Sasha left the courthouse, the press swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, reporters firing questions. She answered calmly, stating her gratitude to the jury for their courage and reiterating that this case was about principle. "Our airports should be safe for everyone without discrimination," she said, her voice strong. "Today's verdict sends a message. No agency is above accountability." In the weeks that followed, the TSA tried to downplay the verdict, hinting at an appeal, while claiming the jury's decision was influenced by emotional testimony rather than fact. But their arguments rang hollow. Internal memos leaked, showing that the agency was scrambling to revise certain screening protocols and re-evaluate staff training methods. Supervisor Grant, Harrington, Lopez, and others were placed on administrative leave, pending further investigation. Some even faced disciplinary proceedings or outright termination. The public reaction was overwhelming. Messages flooded Sasha's inbox from all over the country and even internationally, thanking her for standing up, sharing similar stories, or simply expressing admiration for her courage. While the onslaught of attention was at times overwhelming, Sasha found solace in knowing she had sparked meaningful change. As for karma, it arrived swiftly. Supervisor Grant's name circulated in news reports about the case. His face appeared on television, overshadowed by the word discriminatory. He eventually resigned under pressure. Rumors swirled that no other security organization would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The agents who'd backed him blindly found themselves facing serious questions about their own actions. Harrington and Lopez claimed they'd been just following orders, but that defense carried little weight in the court of public opinion. They too lost their jobs, forced to face the reality that participating in injustice has consequences. Isaiah became something of a local hero. His bravery in coming forward sparked interest in deeper whistleblower protections. He secured a better job, one that rewarded his integrity. Kenneth Evans, freed from the shackles of fear, publicly spoke about his ordeal and started volunteering with civil rights organizations. Sasha's life changed irrevocably. TechAdapt soared in reputation, winning new contracts from clients who admired Sasha's moral stand. She donated a portion of her settlement to advocacy groups, combating racial profiling and supporting travelers' rights. The rest she used to expand her business and provide scholarships to underrepresented youths pursuing tech careers. With that, she honored the countless sacrifices her parents and grandparents had made, forging a path that championed equality and progress. One crisp autumn afternoon, weeks after the verdict, Sasha visited Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport again, this time to catch a flight for another big business presentation. She felt a surge of anxiety going through security, but the process was uneventful. The TSA agents were courteous, some even recognizing her from the case and offering awkward smiles or nods. Whatever changes had occurred might be small, might be temporary, but it was a start. As she walked to her gate, she paused for a moment, watching the throngs of passengers move through the terminal. Families, solo travelers, business people, all with their own stories and hopes. She reflected on her own journey, from that dark day locked in a room to this moment of victory and new beginnings. In her heart, she believed the fight against discrimination was far from over. But she'd proven that it was possible to resist, to speak out, and to win, and she knew many would follow her example. With that knowledge, Sasha boarded her plane, head high, spirit steady, and future bright. Every person deserves the freedom to travel without fear of targeted harassment. Sasha's story showed us how quickly an everyday moment can transform into a battle for justice, and the power that comes from standing firm, even when the odds feel insurmountable. Yet her victory isn't just for her, it's for all those who've ever felt singled out, profiled, or silenced. The echoes of her determination remind us to challenge injustice wherever we see it, and to speak up for ourselves and one another. If you believe in the strength of this message, please show your support by clicking that like button, sharing this story with friends and family, and subscribing for more real-life accounts of resilience and triumph. Together, let's amplify the call for fairness and equality, making sure no one is locked away without a voice or a choice.